So by this point, I'm sure you have already heard of Harman Phoenix 200, which is Harman's 35mm color film stock. But what happens if you shoot this 35mm film stock in a medium format camera? In today's video, I've got a roll of Harman Phoenix 200 and a Mamiya RZ67 Pro II. I'm gonna head out and take portraits on this 35mm film, but I'm gonna load it into this Mamiya RZ67, which is a medium format film camera that shoots 120 film, and I'm gonna be loading it into a 6x7 bag. To do so, I have two 3D printed pieces of plastic, which essentially go on either end of the 35mm film canister so that they can fit into the Mamiya RZ67 bag. I'm also going to be rating Phoenix 200 at 160 or 120, around that kind of mark, and overexposing the film. If you guys have already seen my videos on Harman Phoenix 200 already, then you'll know that I'm not a massive fan at how it handles underexposure, and so we're going to be overexposing it with this roll of film. I'll be shooting with two models, Chris and Iz, who are both amazing content creators, so I'll link them in the description. So let's load this roll into the Mamiya RZ67 and get started. So the way that this works is that you put the 35mm film in between these 3D printed bits of plastic, which I will link in the description. And you're gonna wanna turn the film in the way that feels least natural. So you're gonna want it so that the matte side is facing up. You'll then push it through the film spool on the other end, just like you would 120 film. Put the film back on the camera and advance it until you get to 1 on the film counter. When it comes to taking this film out, you can't rewind it like you would normally with 120 film. So what I did was I got a changing bag, a blackout changing bag from Still Tresse, which I will link in the description, and I put the entire film back in that bag. You could also use a dark room, like if you have a bathroom, for example, that no light comes into, you could do this in a dark room. And then I really carefully took out the canister from one side of the film back and removed the bottom bit of plastic. I then could use the top bit of plastic to kind of like rotate it and re-spool the film. So it was kind of going back into the canister. So I'd push it really gently and the film would just go back into the canister. And with my other hand, I was just feeling on the bit that was spooled in. I took that out of the film back and just let it kind of gently go back into the canister until I was able to remove it from the spool and then keep rotating it until it all went back into the canister. It's a little bit difficult to explain, obviously, without visually showing you, because it had to be done in the dark. So what I might do is in another video or like a little YouTube short or something like that, I will do this with like a blank roll to show you how to do it. Hopefully my verbal explanation isn't too confusing. If you do have questions, let me know in the comments. So I have the film negatives here. So it was Come Through Lab in Manchester who developed my film, and I have scanned them on the Epson B600 just so that I could get a flatbed scan with the sprockets, and you'll see what I mean by that in a moment. So these are the nice purple negatives from Harman. First of all, what you can see is that it did not use the entire roll. And I think that is to do with the way that the film advances. At the beginning, you have to advance it to get to 1 on your film counter before you can start shooting. The second observation is, of course, the way in which the frame is printed. So you can see that we don't have the same width, obviously, as a 6x7 negative, which is why the image is printed over the sprockets, which is these little bits here. So the aspect ratio is a little bit strange because you have the width of a 35mm negative, but the length of a 6x7 negative. Because of this, it was very tricky to actually work out how to frame these photos. I knew that what I would end up getting would be a lot tighter and I'd need to be shooting a lot wider. So I did step back a lot in the process of taking these photos just to kind of try to compensate for that. I think that if I went back in now and shot this again, I would probably take a photo through the viewfinder on my phone and then compare that to the negatives and be able to create some sort of mask for the viewfinder, for the Mamiya RZ67 viewfinder, so that if I wanted to shoot this again, I would know what kind of framing I was working with. I think shooting a 35mm film in a 120 camera is a really interesting concept because there's not really many reasons why you would want or need to do this. It's definitely not something I would do in a professional capacity. for a number of reasons. One being that the aspect ratio is a little bit strange. Two being that of course, it's a little bit trickier to line up your framing. But I do think, just as an experiment, it was really fun because I was able to utilize this 110mm lens from the Mamiya RZ67, which I love the depth of field from. I was able to utilize the whole shooting process of Mamiya RZ67, which I do love. I love that camera. And also there are more 35mm film stocks available, especially in color, than there are 120 film stocks. So I guess if you're just shooting for fun, there are a few different reasons why you might want to do this. I'm not a massive fan of the way that these were framed. They're a little bit too tight for me. And like I said before, I do think I'm going to create some sort of mask situation to help me with that composition if I do this in the future. I also shot another roll of the same photos using a Kodak Portra 160 in 120. So I just swapped out the film backs during the shoot to shoot basically the same frames on 120 and then on 35 to show you kind of the difference mostly. I also tried to keep the framing pretty similar so you could kind of see what I would have gone for if I was shooting on 120 versus what ended up happening with the 35mm film. But this is just a really fun little experiment. When it came to Harman Phoenix 200, I definitely do prefer this stock when you do overexpose it, but there are a couple of photos here at the end with Chris and the balloons where that is a little bit too overexposed, and in my opinion, those blown out highlights are just a little bit too strong for me. I'm also going to put the scans on screen that Come Through sent me because the colors are vastly different for the way that they scanned it with their Noritsu scanner to how I scanned mine with the Epson scanner. And you can see that mine are a lot more neutral. I was really able to neutralize those negatives, which in turn isn't really my favorite thing to do all the time because it takes away from the qualities of, that film stock. When you're shooting portraits, one of the things you really want to make sure of is that skin tones are as accurate as you can make them. And that is what I was kind of going for with the scans that I did. But that being said, I really do like the vibrancy of the colors in the scans from Come Through Lab. So I will include them both on screen so that you can see a little bit of a comparison between the lab scans and my own home scans. Scanning myself is not something I do very often. It's not something I enjoy that much. I enjoy the process of shooting. I enjoy the process of printing. Scanning, not really for me. So the majority of my work, I do usually just get Come Through Lab to scan them for me. But for this one, like I said before, I wanted to scan the sprockets and show you guys what that kind of looked like as well. So I guess this video turns into a video about Harman Phoenix 200, about shooting 35mm film in a Mamiya RZ67, but also how different scanners and different scanning techniques can very heavily alter the outcome of your image. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. It's something a little bit different. It's something that I've been meaning to do for a really long time, so I'm glad to have got this video out there. But thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.